Tropical Storm Freddy 2023 last modified, 3 o'clock March 10, 2023 UTC. While not a complete change in forecast philosophy, the forecast track of Freddy has changed fairly significantly with this forecast. The forecast track continues to take Freddy to a landfall along the coast of Mozambique near Cyclone, but the timeline has been extended as the system is now expected to move at a much slower pace. Due to the offsetting and competing steering influences of the near-equatorial ridge to the northeast and the subtropical ridge to the southwest, the forecast now calls for the system to slowly track towards the coast, but not make landfall until in around 2 days, then continuing inland at around 5 km per hour, 2 to 3 knots, through the end of the forecast period. Environmental conditions are steadily improving, and model guidance continues to show a weakening of the mid-level shear, which will allow for the vortex to symmetrize. Once this occurs, the system will intensify very quickly to a peak of 165 km per hour, 90 knots, in 36 hours, and potentially slightly higher just prior to landfall as it moves over warm, high ocean heat content waters along the coastline. The ultimate peak intensity will depend entirely on how long the system remains over water and how fast it can get its vortex together, as the environment remains primed. Once ashore, the system will rapidly weaken over the terrain of northern Mozambique, ultimately dissipating below warning criteria by the end of the forecast period. But Freddy is a like-a-burial horror movie that never ends, and as discussed below, it may not stay over land for long. Track guidance has separated into 2 distinct groupings over the next 2 days, with one major outlier. The UCMET, GALWEM, and EGRR models make up one group, while the other group consists of the GFS, GEFS, ECMUF, NavGem, and COAMSTC. The HWRF is a significant outlier, different than all the others. The disagreement in the guidance stems from how each model treats the steering ridges, which ridge will strengthen and by how much, combined with disparity in storm intensity, leads to major discrepancies between the model guidance. Through the first 2 days of the forecast, the first camp races out front of the others, approaching the Zimbabwe border while the other camp is approaching landfall. Then beyond 2 days, the first continues racing ahead, while the other camp splits, with the NavGem, ECMUF, ICSENS, and COAMSTC, NavGem, taking a relatively leisurely track to the north then turning back to the east in 5 days, and the GFS, GEFS, and COAMSTC, GFS, touching land for a bit then returning to sea in 4 days. The HWRF is doing its own thing and keeps the system offshore the entire time, making a head fake towards land then turning away and joining up with the GFS track. Needless to say, the track forecast is a bit complicated with very high uncertainty. To compound the uncertainty, the GEFS and ICSENS ensemble means and increasing numbers of individual members are now showing a track that returns to the open sea before 5 days. Intensity guidance is in relatively good agreement, with the coupled COAMSTC guidance indicating a peak between 165 to 185 km/h, 90 to 100 knots, prior to landfall. The COAMSTC ensemble guidance is also showing a 30% probability of RI prior to landfall, while the GEFS is indicating an 80% chance of moderate intensification before landfall. The JTWC forecast lies close to the COAMSTC guidance through the forecast period. The alternate, I Am Legend, scenario sees Freddy do a U-turn after making a brief passage over the coast of Mozambique, returning to water in 4 days and quickly re-intensifying. While confidence in this scenario remains low, with increasing model guidance indicating a loop back to sea, probabilities are increasing. Maximum significant wave height is 8.8 meters, 29 feet.